Everyone, this is Steve Weintraub with Collider, and I'm here at the Cinema Center at the Toronto International Film Festival. I want to give a huge thank you to Range Rover Sport for being our sponsor this year. It is their help that allows us to cover indie movies, big movies, all sorts of things here at Toronto, and I really want to give them a sincere thank you. And now let's talk about On Swift Horses. How are you both doing?
Good.
Excellent.
Glad to be here.
I really want to start with congratulations on the movie. I hate doing the generic thing right up front, but most people will not have seen the movie yet. So how have you been describing it to people?
I've been describing our movie as a romantic film, but sort of a reimagining of the American dream through a queer lens. It starts off as a love triangle and becomes a story about a lot of different kinds of love. And I think it's very surprising and romantic.
100%. One of the many reasons why I enjoyed this movie, and one of the reasons why I'm happy it was made, is that I think all too often, especially younger people, don't really, like, you read about it in a book, but you don't really understand what it was like in different time periods, and like, unless you see it. And movies like this sort of open that door to so many people, you know, especially fans of the cast. Can you sort of talk about that aspect?
Yeah, because it's a film about people trying to find love in a time that's unsympathetic to them. I think it has a timeless quality to it, you know, and it's about a lot of different types of love and affection that maybe at that time didn't have names like we do today, but it addresses all of these ideas. So that was important to me. I think it's I think by making it a period film, it gave us the freedom to really explore these things without having to look at them through a contemporary lens.
Talk about like how you two spoke before, you know, obviously you guys have a meeting, figuring out you're going to work together. Talk a little bit about those conversations on how you decided, A, on the cameras you wanted to use and the lenses, but B, how you wanted it to like look on screen, the colors, everything about it.
Which came first? So the cameras, I think, came second once we decided what we wanted the film to look like.
That's right.
And I'll just kick it off by saying we made a decision early on that we wanted to use documentary photography as a reference. And we ended up pulling images of paintings and different things from the period, but not looking at period films, because this film has aspects of melodrama, of film noir, of the romantic film. So we wanted to avoid those tropes and really put the emotion of the characters first. And the photography, I think, just kind of afforded us a kind of verisimilitude. And Luc can talk about the palette of the piece and I think the cameras, the reason you chose these cameras better than I can.
Yeah, one of the key things Dan told me early, which I think kind of framed everything for me, is this idea of not romanticizing the 50s to the point where it's inaccessible, hence the documentary reference. And I always kind of kept that in my mind, that you want people to feel like they were there. That's what I felt.
That's what we kept saying. We didn't want it to feel nostalgic. Did the same thing with the music too.
That's right.
We had a lot of music on set to kind of bring the actors there. And we always wanted it to be things that we didn't recognize.
Mm-hmm. And kind of everything was drawn from that initial concept. And then as a cinematographer, you start thinking of your tools. And, you know, for me was blending the most modern cameras, which is a lot what we have access to, but finding a sensor, let's say in the digital world, that has a very organic grain. So for me, I chose the red cameras. I've been really obsessed with for that recently. But then you mix that in with a vintage lens that we were able to actually detune. I actually work with the rental house in LA, and Panavision was able to literally design optics that took the edge of the digital nature, because also we're representing the 50s. We didn't want, and a lot of the photography Dan's talking about, a lot of it aren't aged. They're very vibrant and full spectrum. And Dan kept saying full spectrum of color, which to me is realism. So it was a real challenge. You also don't want the film to feel too digital in a way. So I used a lot of post-production looks that were based on old film stocks too. So it transferred all the colors, which seemed to kind of fit within the direction we were going.
And then things started happening naturally. Yeah. You know, as Luc and the production designer and the costume designer got into a groove, you know, there are things that we noticed, especially when we were doing the color timing. You know, I didn't want to have a designed palette. I wanted the palette to be a full range of spectrum of colors so that it felt like the real world rather than something super controlled. What starts to happen as Muriel pursues her truth and follows her, you know, her instincts towards her right life, everything kind of takes on this blue hue. The costumes are blue. The set, you know, of the gay bar she goes to is blue, and it's interesting. The things like that happen just instinctively.
It's so interesting because I don't think the average person is not going to realize the blue. They're not going to catch certain things. It's going to be the people that study the movie that will put it together. But it's so interesting because subliminally, I think they do pick up on these things.
I think so too. You know, and blue traditionally is a color of truth. So I think, you know, Jeriana, our costume designer, chose things very purposefully, and in colors that were unique to the period also. So that was fun. It was fun watching that happen. And when you collaborate with a group of people you really trust, it just starts to flow, and it's not a labored or overly designed thing.
Something I also want to compliment you on is that all too often, like in this film, you could easily have the husband being an antagonist or being an asshole, but there's really no antagonist in like the typical conventional narrative movie. So talk about that aspect of the film and why it was important that people, all of them are like good people.
Yeah, in the more conventional version of this story, the husband would be abusive. There would be the brother would be have this lonely life, and of course the queer people lives would all end tragically, either in, you know, solitude or being murdered or in suicide. You know, the thing that attracted me to this material in Shannon's novel was that it didn't have that, and it reminded me of people like gay and lesbian people that were friends with my parents in the 70s when I grew up, you know, that were just living their lives in suburban Connecticut. You know, I don't know that they had easy lives, but they were a part of our lives. And, you know, these are people who are just kind of getting on with their lives. And in a way, it's like the mundane aspect of building a life and a family, you know, in a time that is historically like unfriendly to you.
Talk about what shot or sequence ended up being the real pain in the ass for the two of you.
Oh, wow. Did we have a hard one?
Maybe it was Magic Hour in general.
Oh, yeah. Don't bring
the time
that up.
you probably wanted to strangle me the most. You've told me.
Well, Luc, to his credit, you know, we did these incredibly one of them actually is still they're all in the film, but it's a slightly changed version of it. But shooting at Magic Hour, to be able to use it as night and to just have that incredible luminous quality that the world takes on at that time gave us a very narrow, you know, margin of time to shoot entire scenes.
I mean, like for people that don't read, you should explain to people that don't realize what Magic Hour is and how limited that time is.
Sure, it's that beautiful time between when the sun sets and full night occurs. You still have that glowing, beautiful light in the sky. And it's a real important time if you're trying to create a timeline, but also having our night exteriors be luminous and glowing and being able, because Julius is searching for Henry the entire time, and time is running out. So the light is fading. So it lasts maybe 30 minutes at the most. And
I thought it was like 15, but I could be wrong.
Oh, with these new cameras, you can extend it.
Oh, got it.
So I'm being generous, but that's a real challenge on the performers, the actors, and you try to get in the kind of mindset of, because we spoke a lot. It's like, we don't have a lot of time. How are we going to do it? But it's still if you're not getting it, you still don't have an option for a take two sometimes. So it was a real challenge, but I think it has a real place in the film and the arc of it. And it has a really
it gives it a
emotional,
kind of urgency too. And then you yell at each other and then you move on. You know, we're never doing that again
There's a lot of stress.
until next week.
That's right.
There's a
Exactly.
beautiful one when Muriel comes back from the bar where she meets the woman from the racetrack and she's kind of drunk and she's walking down the street with her holding her shoes, and then she hears a party and she walks to the neighbor's house, you know, to crash this party, and it is so exquisite. I mean, it's really, really worth it. But it was in that moment of
No, I know the exact shot you're talking about in the house and I
Yeah.
know. So I definitely want to touch on there are some intimate scenes between Jacob and Diego and Daisy and Sasha. Talk a little bit about how you wanted to photograph and other things, but like how did you decide you wanted to photograph these scenes and depict certain sequences?
We set some rules for ourselves. I'll kick it off.
Please.
We set some rules for ourselves, which were just seemed organic. You know, when we're in, let's say, Kansas, you know, it had a very formal film language. When we're in the housing development, it had a kind of rigid quality to it, you know, because we wanted it to feel confining. When we were in the private spaces with the queer characters, we were always handheld. It was the one place, even these small places, where they could be free, and we encouraged, we encouraged improvisation, but we encouraged, the operators not to be afraid of making messy frames, not to be afraid of lens flares. So that it had a authenticity to it, or a kind of a roughness to it, and that was one of the things. And we also really choreographed and rehearsed those with the actors. So that was how we got to it.
Oh, sorry.
No, I just wanted to say exactly what's beautiful about that is this contrast of that American dream, very formal frame, and you almost have to have some place to go. And I appreciated your guidance on let's not overplan this in a way, let magic kind of happen on the day. And I remember you saying that to me. It's like, let's just kind of be in the moment. But having those things contrast each other really gave weight, I thought, to those intimate moments.
Yeah. And, when we first met, we talked about this, and, because the thing that attracted me to Luc's work was, obviously I'd seen Women Talking, which is incredibly controlled and beautiful, but also Tales from the Loop. I feel like he made some of the best hours of series I've ever seen. And that also had a very specific, very controlled look. And he was fearless and absolutely, threw himself and his crew at it and created lighting setups and encouraged a kind of improvisational feel to it. So that was fun.
I always like talking about the editing room because it's where it all comes together. So how did this film change in the editing room in ways you didn't expect going in?
It was a novel that was very interior. There wasn't a lot of dialogue in the novel. So with the writer, we had, to give these people voices. And interestingly, in the editing of it, we pulled a lot of dialogue out. I kept saying to Daisy Edgar-Jones, I think you would have been one of the great silent movie actresses, because she doesn't really talk until the last third of the film when she meets Sandra, and she really opens up, and you realize at that point, she's just sort of always measuring herself against these men and these, and other people. And then she opens up and you get to really find out who she is. So, that was part of the editorial process, paring it down and seeing how much you could remove to make it still stand. And interestingly, it brought the emotion, the romantic part of it forward more, because these are two characters who are always watching people, and they're always they're hiding themselves. So I encourage the editor towards that.
Did you end up with like a lot of deleted scenes?
There were a number. There was more with the horse.
Oh.
Horses always eat up a lot of time. There was more with the horse that Julius brings, which we found it was just more effective without those scenes.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at my cheat sheet to be like, what have I missed?
Yeah, we just
what I mean?
Yeah, we just removed some of the horse stuff, I think, and really pared down a lot of the dialogue, keeping so that the things where there were big speeches, they really had weight. I
wrote one of my little notes that I wrote down was the obstacle of the film, and I'm not sure if it's right, but the obstacle of the film is figuring out how to live an honest life, even if it means hurting the people you love.
Yeah, that was one of the things that really came forward as we were working on it, is the price of freedom. I think the affection between Muriel and Julius is this kind of love where she's in love with his freedom and he's in love with the idea of belonging somewhere. And he's trying to make a relationship with Henry, and she's trying to go out into the world and be independent and hiding money, and, has all of these plans for how to sort of escape plans. And the cost of freedom is you're going to hurt a lot of people along the way.
Completely. I want to go further into this and talk about specifics, but I can't. So it's very much, you know what I mean? Like, no one has seen the movie. So when the film is eventually coming out, we will get into more specifics. Until then, I'm just going to say, look out for On Swift Horses. And thank you so much for coming into the studio. I wish you guys nothing but the best.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.